how is EMS like farming? Because we make things grow in more ways than one. Join us as we have Old MacDonald on our farm, EIEIEMS.
Welcome to Through the Lens of the EMS Wizard podcast. I am Mark Casey, and I'm accompanied by Terry and John and a special guest for this episode. Not sure about where Walter is, but we'll find him and get him caught up.
We're down a guest.
Where's it's
Yeah, we're down to regularly occurring guests.
The John and Terry show is back in full force, though. Now that Terry's come back.
I don't know about full force, but you're both here,
both present.
I'm with us.
Who do we have to harass in this episode, Marcus?
Yeah, we have a very special guest for this particular episode. We have Mr. Chuck Lewis. He is the assistant chief for the North Carolina office of EMS. Welcome to the EMS Wizard podcast, Chief Lewis.
Hey guys, how are y'all?
Doing well. I thought he's the assistant chief of office EMS. I thought he was like some farmer guy.
That's what I see on Facebook.
That's my alter ego. Clark Kent was Superman, so the assistant chief is actually a farmer in real life.
This makes more sense as we go further. Well, hey, we're actually honored to have you on here. We've worked around each other for several years, and I'm anxious to get into asking some background stuff. There's a lot of things about, I think, your path and your journey that's interesting, that people will find interesting as well. So, I tell you what, just give us an intro of yourself and start us off. Just tell us about yourself.
Sure, yeah. So, my name's Chuck Lewis. I'm the assistant chief for the North Carolina Office of EMS. I've been in EMS. This will make my 32nd year, believe it or not. And I don't know how you do that when you're only 35, but I started in preschool, so time does fly. So I'm originally, a lot of folks don't know this, I'm originally from Ashe County up near West Jefferson. I grew up in a small town up there called Lansing. We were so far back in the woods, we watched Saturday Night Live on Wednesday afternoon, and the Episcopalians handled snakes where I was from. So that's how far back in the holler I'm from. But yeah, that's awesome. Where I got my start. Yeah.
Now that explains a lot, and I think you just piqued Terry's interest because I don't know, Terry. There was something about churches and snakes that you was all about at one time. I remember.
That's Mrs. Sheehy. That's Mrs. Sheehy, and that was a life altering experience one time. But
going to church is supposed to be.
It is, but when the pastor said, go get the box from out back, I thought he was talking about a box of snakes. I told her she could hang out if she wanted to, but I'd be out the door.
Was that in Ashe County? Just so we can clear that up.
It wasn't, but I have visited the cheese factory in Ashe County, so I've seen cheese get made. It's very riveting. Yeah.
Yep. The only cheese plant in North Carolina is in downtown West Jefferson.
Well, what brought you to EMS? I mean, what did little Chuck doing when he was running around? Was he hoping to be an assistant EMS chief one day as he was making the cheese and worshiping?
No, man. It was kind of, I think I probably followed a path that's pretty close to a lot of folks my age and how they got started in EMS. I really kind of started out, I wanted to be an athletic trainer, and that was sort of the career trajectory that I was on in high school. I was college prep and all that kind of stuff, planning to go and sort of follow that path. And the school that I was at, the high school that I was at, our head athletic trainer said, "Hey, we need for all of y'all." I think there was 2 or 3 of us at the time. We need for all y'all to go take a CPR class. And so we went to the local fire department, which was like a quarter mile down the road, on a Tuesday night. I think back then it was like 2 or 3 nights that you had to go, and it was the American Heart stuff and Annie, are you okay kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we went and took the CPR class, and that was sort of my first introduction, because the guys that were teaching that were first responders and EMTs at the fire department. And so that sort of piqued my interest. And um, so I decided that I wanted to join the fire department and start running some first responder calls. Well, the problem was I was about 16 and a half years old. I couldn't take an EMT class. They really wouldn't let you do much. But the first responder captain said they're having an EMT refresher at the department next door. Why don't you go take that? And then you can come back and you can, we'll let you run calls. You can't do anything. We're going to send you to get a little bit of education, a little bit of knowledge. So I went and took that EMT refresher class, and I was hooked. I absolutely was hooked. Got into an EMT class as quickly as I could, and took that in. I started the EMT class in, 1991, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood. Finished the class and had to wait until took the test, and then had to wait until my 18th birthday for them to send my card to me. Well, then an EMT intermediate class came up, and I took that, and I was an EMT intermediate when I graduated high school, because I turned 18 in October and graduated in June. So, I was the typical EMS rat. I kind of hung out at EMS and joined the reserves and would go over there and hang out and run calls, volunteer and all that sort of thing. And sort of decided that, by now my career goals are kind of shifting. I've decided I wanted to be a paramedic, and enrolled at Catawba Valley Community College, because in the early 90s, there were only like 2 or 3 community colleges that offered an EMS program, and Catawba Valley Hickory was the closest one to us. So signed up there, went for a couple of months, and was back home EMS. And actually at the time, Jerry Ashley, I don't know if you guys know or remember Jerry. Jerry was the EMS director, because in Ash, it wasn't a county-based service. It was a contract for service. The county put up bids for a contract every, I think it was every 4 years or something, and folks would come in and bid on it, and whoever got the contract provided the service. Well, Jerry had the contract at the time, and I was home, fall vacation, and he had an opening and said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to work?" And I said, "Well, I'm in this paramedic class." He said, "Just so happens the local community college has just started one of those 2-night-a-week paramedic classes. Let me make a few phone calls and see if I can get you in." Well, he got me in, and sure enough, I ended up starting to work for him, and that was sort of how I got my start in EMS. Was I just kind of sort of fell into it.
Well, was it a rescue squad system up there at all? I mean, is that when you said reserve, was that from the private contractor?
So back in the day, and I think a lot of systems used to do this, they would take, guys that were in the community, and this is where they got their employees from, had their EMT card, their intermediate card, their paramedic card, whatever the case may be. They would join the reserve corps. A lot of EMS agencies had a reserve corps, and if somebody called out sick, somebody was on vacation, they would, call the reserves, the guys on that reserve list, and say, "Hey, would you like to come in and work?" And we would go in and work for no pay. I mean, it was just for the fun of doing it. And at the time, there was probably 5 or 6 of us on the reserve corps up there. And I think the reason I got offered the job was because I was there all the time. I mean, every waking hour that, I wasn't in school or gone or, out of town or something like that, I hung out at EMS. And so you could go in and fill in for guys whenever they were out sick or on vacation or whatever. And then Jerry had a full-time opening, and I got offered the job.
Well, that is definitely different. Mark, you was like 6 months old when that happened, and you probably don't know anything about what he's talking about.
That's actually what I was thinking is, Mark, what were you doing in 1991?
In 91, I was 4 years old.
Learning to ride a bike.
Yeah. Falling off of the bicycle multiple
Baby
times.
Mark on the bike.
So, Chief, what I would ask, and it's rare that I ask this question, but that's a pretty good time span, 91 to now, and I know that you've gained some additional certifications. I think you're underselling yourself and done some pretty awesome stuff in the industry, doing some flight stuff and some other things. What would you say is one of the biggest changes that you've seen in that story arc of EMS from 91 to today?
You mean for me personally?
Sure. Either you personally or the industry, or maybe even in the state, something that.
Yeah. So definitely in the industry there. So early 90s to now, there doesn't seem to be now. Keep in mind, I'm not in the field nearly as much as I have been, but I talk to lots of folks and that kind of thing. There doesn't seem to be a lot of um, non-committed, well, not non-employment interest any longer. There are not a lot of folks that are joining the rescue squad to get into EMS because when I got started, really the only way to get a job full time in EMS is somebody had to die or retire. I mean that,
Right.
you hear people talk about that, but I got a position that came open. There at the time there were only one or two positions that came open like in a 3-year span. I mean, it wasn't like guys were coming in and working 6 months and then going the next county over. They came and they stayed. And so that's a huge change. Used to you had to get involved and show a lot of initiative, be engaged, hang out, volunteer, kind of, quote unquote, pay your dues. I don't know if that's still an in vogue statement or not, but you really kind of had to pay your dues to be able to get a full-time spot on a truck. And now, it seems like coming out of school, or even before you come out of school, man, you got to pick where you want to go. I mean, it's a total shift from what it was then. Total shift.
So what do you think that change was? I mean, I agree with you. It was different. I came in the 90s too. I think Terry did as well. And you're right. The interest, well, I've got my thoughts on it, but what do you think the interest was? Because the interest certainly has changed. Before it was like, man, I'm interested in going out here and doing this EMS job and being involved and doing all this work. And now it's like that doesn't exist, and you're having to use other ways to communicate with people and are coming in for different means, and they may not stay. I mean, they may only be there for 6 months to 2 years or something.
So one of the things that kind of I think, or it seems to me like it doesn't seem like EMS as a profession has the respect that it did then. And I don't know why, because, we've come such a long way in terms of educational opportunities and skill levels and things that folks can do. But it just doesn't seem like EMS is recognized in the community like it was then. And maybe that's just anecdotal and from where I'm sitting, what I see, but it doesn't seem like that the appreciation is there for what folks do.
There was almost a desire of excitement. Maybe it was a little bit of that. I'm in the know. I remember a little bit of that about myself was like, I'll be in the know. I'll be able to get out there and I'll know something's going on and I'll see some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if over time the internet and social media has kind of placed everybody in this, you're a click away from being in the know of anything, and maybe some of the glorification of EMS would be that. Well, Mark, what would you speak to on that? Because you're kind of like, the child, 22 years old there yourself, and stayed in EMS for for a minute, and even you wanted to get out of it. So,
well, I can say that I wanted to get out of it, but I can say that I think one of the things that really excited me about, which I come up in it. My dad was a fire chief, still is fire chief. He was very heavily involved in fire and rescue back in the day. So I was brought up into it. I wanted to go with dad to the fire meeting on Monday nights. I wanted to go whenever they would pull on call. I wanted to go hang out with dad for a little while he was pulling call. So I got to see what that was kind of like at a younger age. And then whenever I finally turn of age, I can be a junior fireman now. I can go do all these exciting things. And, we get that adrenaline rush. That's some of the things that we look at for getting into the profession is, we want to help people serve our communities, but we also get that little bit of adrenaline rush. And I think we're all guilty of this is, that dopamine release we find it all the time in our hands, and we're constantly, infusing our brains and experiences with that dopamine rush from social media, all that information flow, knowing what's going on in our communities, to where, that doesn't look as appealing, because I can sit here in the comfort of my chair and just, this is the easy thing. But I think there's been a large recognition of how much that contributes to, harming our mental wellness. as well. And I think that's one big thing that we're recognizing in EMS more and more now is how we should be taking care of ourselves mentally as well as physically. Right.
And I think something else that you kind of hit on there, it was a social outlet.
Yeah.
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 I mean, going down to EMS and hanging out with the guys, that was a social outlet. And I think we've seen a lot of deterioration of a lot of different social groups, collective physical groups kind of slow down, decreased membership in fire departments. Terry could probably talk about decreased membership in Masonic lodges and people not coming out. I mean, those were real social outlets for folks that now, to Mark's point, it's right there on your phone. So I think that's been a major shift too.
Yeah, you almost have that Ruritan Club level stuff right there on a mobile device now, and to be in a group, they even got them, Facebook groups and stuff that you can be involved in or whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what do you think? What's a good way to get people interested? If I were to come up with a clickbait title to get people to think, maybe I've got some prepare for the coming shortage. EMS with your spouse can be trouble. Work cattle and work EMS and no, wait, never mind. So,
Calls,
yeah.
So I'll be honest with you, Terry. I think that's the $1 million question. How, and Tom and I have talked about this. Tom Mitchell, the chief of the Office of EMS, have talked about this behind closed doors. How do we make EMS literally? How do we make EMS sexy again? How do we get people interested and involved? And there's just so much competition for people's time, attention, and eyeballs that it's hard to break through the noise. You've got to find folks that want a true visceral outlet, something that they can see, taste, touch, and feel, instead of, an electronic device that want to get out and physically do something in their communities. And you got to find those people, and then you got to narrow it down to those that are interested in EMS, and then you got to narrow it down to those that, have the real acumen to do it. And we're looking for needles in a haystack.
And I think maybe you said something that I have said several times, and that is, how do you make EMS sexy again? And it's like, are you going to draw them in you're going to help people? Because if they get in there, there's a few things we have to note, that we're probably have better health care available than we did in 1991. So we have better cardiac care, we have better stroke care, great health systems in North Carolina, and people has been more aware of their health, and we make food healthier and make cars safer. So just overall, the population isn't maybe as sick or as in need. So the folks that are actually calling 911 aren't getting, the folks that are calling 911 aren't in need of the people that are responding, and the training might be off. Like if I'm trained to high acuity levels of something, and I've got somebody calling 911 that just needs a ride to the hospital, maybe I don't feel valued. Whereas in rescue squad days, I felt valued because there was a need, because it wasn't there. When someone called, they needed it. And until we address a little bit of that, we may be chasing this particular rabbit for a while.
Yeah.
Terry, do you have rabbits at the Outer Banks?
Nope,
the sharks ate them. That's right. You don't have rabbits. I'm sorry.
I don't. I feel like 2 months ago maybe Chuck had rabbits. I don't know. I go through spits and spurts watching his YouTube channel, and so
we no longer have rabbits. Yeah.
Okay. And they ran away. Mrs. Sheehy is like, "What did they do with those rabbits?" And I was like, well, they're at the farmer's market, sweetheart."
we sold them to a farmer that was interested in getting into rabbits. Yeah, so they went to a good home.
Good. Chief, to take us in that, that knowledge and to take a 90-degree turn, we sometimes see where folks will say, well, I'm a good paramedic, so that makes me a good supervisor. Well, I'm a good first level supervisor, so I should supervise a shift or an agency or whatever. And sometimes we find where folks have some some knowledge gaps with some things. And so what's a big piece of knowledge that you would say if you're looking to advance in your career? Um, we've heard from some other people, whether it's data or any number of different things that are non-stereotypical EMS related, that don't go to a 12 lead class, go to a statistics class or something. So what's something that you would give to the watchers and to the listeners to say, hey, when you're sharpening your tool in the tool shed, take a look at this.
So I think, well, first off, I think you do have to have a good solid knowledge base of the industry. And, I think good clinical skills are certainly important, but that's not, a good clinician can certainly not equal a good leader, without a doubt. When I, so when I started with the Office of EMS, I started in 2004 and I was a field specialist. And then I was in the Western office out in Conover. And then in 2014, our manager retired and I was promoted into the manager of that office with zero managerial experience. I mean, none, zip, zilch. I had never even been a shift supervisor at an EMS agency. And so I was, I was promoted into that role. And so I started seeking out, I had a bachelor's degree but it was all, clinical care and that some management kinds of things, but nothing really specific to the management role. So I started seeking out, how do you be a good manager? How does this even work? And I found a podcast, and the name of that podcast was Manager Tools. And it was a guy, man, Mark Hortzman, and I can't remember the other fellow's name, but they had been managers at a number of different Fortune 500 companies, IBM, some of those kinds of places. And they had built this podcast and this whole ecosystem around how to be a good manager. And so I started listening to all those podcasts that I could listen to, and they recommended some books by I can't remember who wrote the book. Isn't that terrible? But that was where I learned, and I took a lot of the principles and things that those guys talked about and started applying them, and daggone, that stuff worked. And so that was really kind of how I learned to be a manager myself, was just OJT and seeking out some good resources on Peter Drucker. That was the author. Peter Drucker wrote a number of managerial books. But that was how I, learned to do the management stuff that I do, is just by seeking it out and finding some resources. But I think that, if you're promoted into a management position, a lot of the principles of management are the same, whether you're managing, a 5-truck EMS shift or whether you're managing, 15 widget builders at, some Fortune 500 company. Communication, being able to communicate with your staff regularly, understanding personality styles. A lot of those foundational things are the same no matter where you're at. So that's sort of how I got in, how the tools that I learned to become more of a manager.
And that's what we've seen. I mean, and you're right. There wasn't, or it was difficult to find those niche level things of like the specifics of being an EMS. So a lot of that, we see this all the time in officer classes that we teach, is how do you find out if you did something right when they don't tell you that you did it wrong, and it's on the job training. And if they did something wrong, then someone comes in and tells them, and it's sort of that negative reinforcement. Sometimes it happens like I have to make a mistake first before I know what the right thing to do is. And so it to hear that, coming from that exists west, east, even to the highest levels. Office EMS guys, they've had that experience too. So folks out there that are going through that now, it doesn't matter where you are. Everybody's been through that style of on the job training as well. So
yeah.
What led you to the farming life though? I mean, I mean, then this is going to be a surprise to everybody. I mean, it really is. I mean, you look at John Wilson, you think somewhere along his 1 year pins, he had to have farmed something, right? I try to have lots of children, so they cut the grass. That's how much of a farmer I am. I don't have to do a whole lot of that. What got you into it? Is that something you was born in or something that you took an additional interest in later? Shut up,
So,
Terry.
so yes, no, and yes. So growing up, my grandparents were tobacco farmers up in Ashe County. Believe it or not, we grew tobacco up there, and I absolutely positively despised it. I hated it. I was 8 when I was a small kid. I was about 7 or 8 years old. My grandpa would take one of those wooden Coke boxes, drill 2 holes in it, put a rope in it, put it around my neck, and load me up with tobacco plants. And I would walk along and drop tobacco plants into a setter. And so that was my first experience of farming. I swore I would never do that. Swore I would never do it. Fast forward to about 2015, 2016. My wife, who is she's a fabulous cook. I mean, she is par excellence. She has chef quality cooking abilities. She
Sandra
decided
put a rope around your neck and put a box, and she said, "Chuck, I need you to plant some tomatoes."
yeah. No, she went. So she decided she wanted to learn how to do butcher work, how to take an animal carcass and break it down into steaks and roasts and all that kind of stuff. So she went up and she done a sort of this summer internship with a local butcher shop. And she came home one day and she said, I think there's something to this local food, know your farmer kind of thing. And I said, yeah, I'm sure there probably is. And I went back to playing online poker, whatever it was I was doing. And so I don't know, month or so later, we were kind of scrolling through Netflix and there was this film. It was a documentary called Food Inc. And we watched that and man, the light bulb went on and it was all about the industrialized food system and where our food comes from and how, big ag works. And there was this guy on there by the name of Joel Salatin. He's up in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, and he's got a family farm up there, and they do things in a regenerative kind of way. and the light bulb went off, and I said, I think there's something to this. Well, about that same time, I had taken the job that I'm in now as the assistant chief. And we were living in Wilkes County and we were going to have to move because, that was pre-COVID and you were in the office 5 days a week, yada, yada, yada. So we decided, well, let's buy some land and, we'll keep a few chickens for ourselves and we'll just, we'll kind of try to grow a little bit of stuff for ourselves. And so we ended up buying 20 acres in Guilford County and decided we were going to raise some chickens for meat, some broiler chickens. And there's a difference between an egg chicken and a meat chicken. So we decided we were going to raise some of these birds. And so I was driving back and forth to Raleigh and I was listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos at home, not on the road, watching YouTube videos. Yeah. And consuming all the content I could consume. And I heard a guy on a podcast. The name of it was The Grass-Fed Life. Fellow by the name of Darby Simpson. He changed my life. And he said, pound for pound, hour for hour, based on your labor, pigs are more profitable than chickens. So I came home and made the grand announcement to my wife, we're getting pigs. And so the week of Valentine's Day, 2018, with zero farming experience other than dropping a few tobacco plants into a setter, we got 40 chickens and 6 pigs in the same week. And I would not recommend anybody do that. That's not a smart way to go.
Not a romantic Valentine's.
No. And so fast forward to 2020, we get, COVID comes along. I end up getting home based. In 2020, we saw our farm business grow by about 3 times, about 3x the business that we had done in 2019.
Wow.
Over the course of the next year, it looks like I'm going to stay home based. An opportunity came up to move back to Wilkes County onto 70 acres. And so we moved back here onto 70 acres, October of 2021. That we went from that first year of doing 40 chickens and 6 pigs to last year we processed around 28 cattle, 70 some pigs, 1,500 chickens, and a couple thousand dozen eggs. So we've seen our farm business grow, and quite frankly, my wife does the lion's share of it. We do have a couple of part-time folks that work for us. I'm just kind of here on my days, in and out with the office. I'm usually up about 4 o'clock and doing OEMS stuff. And by 8 o'clock, when everybody else gets to work, I've got a few hours in, and then I'm in and out during the day, Zoom calls, emails, and that kind of thing. And but we, a lot of early mornings and late nights, and so that's sort of our farming story.
So it brings up one really good question that I'm still trying to learn and figure out myself. But we always talk about this work-life balance where you have so much stuff going on at home versus all the things that are going on at work. And we tend to put these on two opposite ends of the scale whenever, they coincide on together more oftentimes than not. One affects the other just as much as the other. So what would be a piece of advice you would like to offer everyone to help kind of maintain that balance?
Know where the boundaries are. And when I'm at work, I'm at work. When I'm in the office, I'm in the office, and that's what my focus is, and that's what I'm committed to working on. And when I'm not in the office, I'm not in the office. If my phone rings after 5 o'clock, unless it's one of our field staff, and I don't answer it. If Terry calls me at 7:30 one night, it'll go to voicemail. I'll listen to voicemail, and if it's urgent, I'll call Terry back. But on the flip side, if Jeff Powell calls me at 1 in the morning and I see it's Jeff Powell, I'm going to answer the phone. So, you waving off Jeff Powell?
No, I just guess I'm not on the best friend list.
We know who's not. The second best friend, the third best friend.
No, we're ranking friends. I guess I'm on the back.
It's just a staff thing. If the guys call me, I'm answering personal. I'm answering staff.
So, Chief, to kind of follow up that question. So you're there for your people, but sometimes you need somebody who's there for you. And that sounds like a job description for a best friend. So if somebody if you were posting your job listing for your best friend, what's one or two things that you look for in that best friend, and who is your best friend?
So without a doubt, my wife is my best friend. There's only one answer to that. Somebody that's supportive, puts up with your crazy ideas of doing stuff that's unconventional, like getting pigs and chickens all in the same week. Sandra has absolutely been the most supportive force in my life. Whenever I've, wanted to do crazy stuff, she stuck by me. Whenever I've made major mistakes, she stuck by me. There's no doubt that she's my best friend.
John usually says the same thing about me. So,
well, when I list the criteria as to why you don't meet it, yes, you're right.
and that position is not open, and I don't ever foresee an opening in that department.
Okay. Copy.
See, John, there should be some lessons right there for you. Listens to others' ideas. just throwing that out there.
You broke up. I can't hear you.
Terry heard me. He's higher on the list.
Chuck, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast with Mark and myself. And I'm sorry Terry had to be here, but we're glad you showed up.
I'm glad Terry's here. I'm sorely disappointed that Terry does not have the hat on. I almost didn't recognize him.
There's been episodes where the hat was the only thing he had on, and we couldn't hear those.
Yeah, it's on the cutting room floor with. Never mind.